The psalmist declares, "Walk about Zion and go all around her. Count her towers, mark well her bulwarks, consider her palaces." On this Roots and Reflections, we're going to take up that exhortation, walking all around Mount Zion. But is this really the Zion of David?
The name Zion moved. The mountain didn't move. In the Bible, we read a verse, Psalm 48, that talks about Mount Zion on the sides of the north. Well, if you look at the map today, Mount Zion is on the side of the west and south, outside the city. And you say, what happened? The mountain moved to the west and to the south over time. And that's what we have as Mount Zion today.
You know, Mount Zion typifies, you know, the place and the area where God is going to pour out His Spirit and fill, again, the sons of Greece, those who believe His word, and touch, again, the entire nation, as well as the world, the nations of the world.
This model of Jerusalem in the First Temple period, the time of the kings of Judah, shows how the original city of David, including the Temple Mount, expanded westward, eventually absorbing Mount Zion into Jerusalem. 3 millennia later, in 1948, the reborn state of Israel was fighting for its survival, with battles raging in the very city chosen by King David as capital. After a long siege, the Jewish quarter fell to the Jordanian Arab Legion. Jews were again forced to flee synagogues and homes where they had lived for centuries. However, in a counterattack on May 18, 1948, the Harel Brigade of the Palmach at least succeeded in taking Mount Zion, which for the next 2 decades served as Israel's front line next to the Old City. This position was precariously separated from West Jerusalem by the steep valley of Gehenna.
Look at this. This is a hand-cranked, tough to move invention of Uriel Hefetz, who was an Israeli soldier in the engineering corps during the War of Independence in 1948. In fact, this cable car went the length of 200 meters to Mount Zion, rising 50 meters above the Ben Hinnom Valley, and was lowered during the day so the Arab Legion armies couldn't see it, but by night it was fully put in use to evacuate the wounded soldiers and people, as well as sending food supplies, medical supplies, and of course ammunition to fight for Israel's survival. This was one incredible invention by one incredible man, and it was only revealed to the public in 1972, up to Mount Zion.
The Cable Car Museum is well worth a visit on the way to Mount Zion. The actual gondola car remains suspended above the valley floor as a memorial of aspirations to return to the Jewish quarter. Since the cable car is no longer running, the way across is on foot, with a detour down the valley.
Coming out of the sewers of the Gehenna Valley, this was a pretty stinky place considering a lot of bad things went on here. 3,000 years ago, this was the garbage dump of Jerusalem. This valley is associated with fire. It is synonymous with the word hell, or Gehinnom in Hebrew. This valley is associated with abomination and child sacrifice. As parents offered their innocent children and babies to the ancient fire rituals, worshiping the pagan idol Moloch, they eased their seared consciences, thinking they were doing a good deed.
The abominable high place in the valley of Gehenna was called Tophet, which suggests in Hebrew a place of drums, which were beaten to drown out the screams of infants burned to Moloch. The smoke of blazing pyres rose above Gehenna. Thankfully, the righteous King Josiah ended the practice of baby sacrifice, and he defiled Tophet, which is in the valley of the son of Hinnom, that no man might make his son or his daughter pass through the fire to Moloch. Jeremiah later prophesied that the place would be used as a cemetery.
The secret passage to Akeldama, 4 fingers in the holes of the rock. This is Akeldama, the field of blood. After Judas betrayed Jesus, he said, "I have sinned by betraying innocent blood." Then he threw down the pieces of silver in the temple and departed and went out and hanged himself. The chief priest decided to take those 30 pieces of silver and buy a burial place, a potter's field to bury strangers in, here in the field of blood in the valley of Gehenna.
And talking about a place to bury strangers, next to a keldama is a little visited Crusader vault, used as the last resting place for prominent members of the Crusader Kingdom of Jerusalem. Nearby, the valley walls are honeycombed by Second Temple period tombs. Jeremiah was right. Time to get back to Mount Zion. I mentioned that it stood on the front line for 19 years as the forward Israeli position next to the Old City. Jews crossing the valley to get as near as possible to the holy sites faced sniper fire along the pilgrimage route up to Zion.
From 1948 to 1967, Jewish worshipers came up to Zion along this path, which is now abandoned. In those days, it actually sheltered them from sniper fire, but brought them one step closer to the Western Wall and the Temple Mount. At this spot for 19 years was the closest position that Jewish worshipers could get to the Western Wall in Jerusalem. Roots and Reflections is a program created to bring you the Bible, culture, and education from Israel. It is our desire to build you up in your faith, to bring you hope both now and in the future, and to share God's love with all of you. Call the number on your screen and partner with us as we seek to share the good news from Jerusalem to the ends of the earth.
The area of Mount Zion has changed a lot in 2,000 years, yet one practice carried on today as then is visiting the tomb of King David. Accessible through the courtyard of a yeshiva and synagogue, it is marked by a dark tombstone covered in velvet cloth. 20 centuries ago, it was different. The tomb was housed under a monumental structure capped by a solid stone pyramid, as seen in this Holy Land model of ancient Jerusalem, which follows the description of the ancient Jewish historian Josephus Flavius. David's tomb was probably comparable in size and shape to these Second Temple period tombs in the Kidron Valley, known as the Tomb of Zechariah and the Monument of Absalom.
Obviously, this structure in its current form didn't exist here 3,000 years ago. But 2,000 years ago, we read in the writings of Josephus that there was a tomb, the tomb of King David, in the area of Mount Zion. Pilgrims from all over came to venerate and show their respect and come visit the tomb of King David.
Mount Zion is layered, not as in archaeological mounds, but rather architecturally. Visitors walk up flights of stairs from David's tomb to Christian and Muslim places of interest on higher floors, and roofs with spectacular views. Under Islamic rule, religious sites revered by Christians or Jews were only allowed to exist in the shadow of the dominant minaret.
This minaret, built during the Islamic period, overlooking the courtyard where the tomb of King David lies, reminds me of a story how Muhammad himself appointed blind men as muezzins in order to call forth prayer for the Muslims. But it brings us back to another story. Why did he do this? Because, of course, perched high in the minarets, they could look down upon the courtyard, look at immodest women. Kind of reminds us of the story of David and Bathsheba. So I think we just better close our eyes and move on. On the rooftop above King David's tomb, behind me is the King David Hotel. I wonder if King David ever thought a hotel in Jerusalem would be named after him. Which brings up a good question. Who's collecting royalties on his name today? I'm a son of David. Let's go check it out.